Guten Morgen YouTube! Das Wasser in den Radiator is changed every 30,000 miles as part of the sea service, or perhaps more realistically these days, every 2 years, whichever comes the sooner. And that's what we're doing this morning. But before we do that, just a couple of words about maintenance operations in between system refills. Every day's a school day at the Elan M100 restoration series, and this word, kalt, which is stamped into the header tank here, that means cold in German, explaining all that tomfoolery at the start. And if you look from there, there's an arrow pointing all the way down to a line marked just under the seam of the tank, just there. And that is the cold fill level for the coolant. The Elan, it uses a sealed system, so there should be very little topping up of water required in between fluid changes. If you are having to top up the tank regularly, then either you've got a leak somewhere or the head gasket's blowing. The cap on the header tank, the system is pressurised to 120 kilopascals, and it's important that you use the right cap. You can tell you've got the right cap because it will have a number 120 moulded into the top of it there. Pressurising the system raises the boiling point of the fluid, and it's important that you use the right cap because the cooling fans don't cut in until the coolant reaches 110 degrees C. So if you just use any old unpressurised cap on there, the fluid will have boiled before the cooling fans start cutting in to cool it down. If you want to test your antifreeze concentration, the easy way to do it is to remove the cap from the header tank, take a pipette or a siphon and draw some coolant out of the header tank and just put that in a jar and stick that in your freezer at -20 overnight. If it comes out solid the next morning, you haven't got enough antifreeze in there. Now, even if you're using the car in a warm climate where it's never going to freeze, it's still important that you use antifreeze at the correct concentration, but mainly for corrosion protection. The cylinder head, the aluminium cylinder head in particular, will corrode very badly if you just use plain water. The car has two different cooling systems, and if you want to, it's easy to test whether they're both working. When the engine's running, a conventional water pump underneath the black plastic cover there, driven by the cam belt, circulates water around the engine. And when the temperature of the coolant reaches 110 degrees C, two electrically operated cooling fans mounted down there on the back of the radiator cut in to draw air through the radiator and cool the fluid down. When the engine's switched off though, if the coolant is still at 110 degrees C, there's an electrically operated pump just there which continues to circulate the coolant round after the engine's switched off until the temperature drops to a safe level. Now, if you want to test that the cooling fans and that electric pump are working, it's easy to do. This thing is the thermostat housing, and if you look on the top of there, there's this plastic cover over the temperature switch which operates those two systems. Now, this is a turbocharged car. If you have a normally aspirated car, Oliver, you'll still have one of these, it'll just be in a slightly different position. It's the cap with the single green or orange and black wire going to it. Now, if you press those two tabs in and pull that cap off, in there is the electrical contact for the switch. Now, with the ignition switched off, if you just short that metal contact inside the plastic cap to earth, then you'll hear the electric cooling pump operating. Just to show you in close-up, wire in the cap, just against a good earth on the engine block, and there you can hear the electric pump running. But if you turn the ignition on and repeat that, then the main cooling fans on the radiator should operate. Draining and refilling the coolant is a pretty straightforward job. Now, we've got the front bumper off the car here. You don't need to remove the front bumper to replace the coolant, but you will find the job a lot easier if you remove this black plastic under tray which is bolted on just behind the front bumper, just in there. Now, it's held on by 4 M6 machine screws. Because of where they are in the car, they do tend to go very rusty, so it's very easy to shear those when you're undoing this. So take a bit of care taking that off. But then remove the cap from the header tank. Water can only get out if air can get in.
Set the heater control to hot so we drain the heater matrix.
Then to drain the coolant, if you have an American market or late model UK car, there's a drain plug on the back left hand side of the radiator just there. But if you haven't got one of those, then you'll have to work from underneath the car to remove the bottom hose from the rear right side of the radiator there. But however you do it, try to catch more water in the bucket than you do in your face.
When you go to refill the system, pop the headlights up and see if you have a plastic plug there underneath the left-hand headlight, and if you do, unscrew that and remove it, because that's the bleed plug which lets the air out as you're adding the water back in. You may not have one though, depending on the market of car you've got.
When the system is drained down, reconnect the hose or do up the drain plug and then make up your new coolant according to the manufacturer's instructions. Now, even if where you live is a Scotcho, then the minimum concentration of antifreeze in water is 25% for corrosion protection, and our viewers in Siberia will need a considerably stronger solution than that. But when your solution's made up, just add it slowly through the header tank. If you add the water slowly, that gives the air plenty of opportunity to bleed out while you're filling the system. If you have a bleed plug, then do it up when water starts peeing out of it. When you've refilled the system back up to the calt line, then start the engine and run it at idle to circulate the rest of the air that you've trapped out of the system. Now, as the air circulates out, the level in the header tank will drop. That's quite normal. Just don't let the header tank run completely dry. When the temperature gauge is showing that the engine's hot, so we know that the thermostat's fully open, we've circulated all the air out, then just stop the car and let it cool down fully. And when it's completely cold, then just top up the coolant back up to the calt line, and that's it, the job's done. Auf Wiedersehen, pet.